Good afternoon, sir. Am I audible?
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Sir, this is Ashokan from Pillai College.
Yes, sir.
So
Yeah,
just
of course.
we are checking right now, testing.
Sure, sure.
In few minutes, we'll start this. Okay, sir. As soon as the session is over, I will let you know, sir. Because this is for checking the audio and video session.
Sure, sure.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
for explaining oil, gas, petroleum, its utilization, energy available, and demand, and world politics playing its role in it. Uh, Moreover, it gave us an idea with why we should go for sustainable energy. Thank you so much, sir, for your great session and interactive session.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sorry for the time constraint, we couldn't pull you up. Moving ahead, we have our next speaker. For that, I would like Dr. G.V. Patil, sir, Head of Mechanical Department, to kindly introduce our next speaker.
Recording in progress.
Keep the camera this way.
Can you hear us? So Pratik sir, can you hear us?
Yeah.
This now we have gone forward. Forward. Within 2 minutes, I will start. Hello. Yeah. He responded.
Can I start, or I mean, are you waiting for something?
Yeah, sir. 2 minutes we will start. Can you hear us?
Yeah, sure.
So welcome, Mr. Pratik. Prasoon sir, on behalf of IIC College of Engineering and Technology, I welcome you for session on solar energy. Basically, he is from SICI, that is Solar Energy Corporation of India. Currently, Mr. Pratik Prasoon sir is working as a senior manager at SICI. Mr. Pratik Pasim has done his Master of Business Administration from University of Delhi. He has done MTech from IIT Delhi in Energy Studies. Also, he has done Executive Education Certification from Imperial College of London. I welcome you, sir. Sorry for delay, sir, because earlier the speaker
No, that's
you started little late. So thank you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. So I'll just share my screen. Yeah. So good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Pillai HOG College of Engineering for inviting me to their session. So just a brief overview what what we do. So basically, Solar Energy Corporation of India is a PSU incorporated under the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. It is basically it was incorporated in 2011 to implement the government's targets under National Solar Mission. At that time, the targets were 20 gigawatt of solar PV capacity, solar photovoltaic capacity, to be installed by 2022. In around 2014-15, we enhanced that target to 100 gigawatt of solar PV by end of this year, and 60 gigawatt of wind capacity by end of this year. So what we do will come to that. So I'll just begin the session giving a brief overview of what the sector is all about. I hope a lot of you are already aware of the renewable energy concept in general. This is the and this image is basically what is the sector all about. India as a planet is endowed with quite a rich resource of solar potential, especially the area between the two tropics. And India in general is blessed with a very high resource potential in terms of solar as well as wind. At the international level, the countries which are falling around these tropics have also formed an association called International Solar Association to tap this high solar potential. The government of India is also leading a joint global effort of tapping its resource across the globe under a concept called One Nation, One World, One Sun, One World, One Grid. Sorry, sir. Yeah. So basically, the concept is that the sun, even though it sets in one location, it is not setting in general for the entire Earth. So if you connect the entire globe with a single grid, you can tap that energy which is generated at one part of the globe and use it to power another part of the globe. So that is sort of a theoretical concept at this stage, but the government of India is leading that effort. Now, just a bit of some statistics, just to give an idea of the gravity of the sector. So across the world, currently we have the total RE installation of more than 3,000 gigawatt, and the majority of that RE capacity is currently shared by solar and wind capacity. Solar photovoltaic capacity is the predominant technology. In India, we have solar thermal concept also, which harnesses the thermal energy which is generated by the sun. But technically and commercially, that technology has proven not to be as viable as solar photovoltaic technology, which harnesses the light effect of the sun, the solar radiation. So around 2014-15, the government has in general focused largely on the PV technology. So the solar photovoltaic capacity in the world is 770 gigawatt by 2020, and the wind capacity is more mature in general, and it has crossed over 800 gigawatt by 2021. Coming to India, Indian RE sector also witnessed the same trend. The wind sector was more mature until somewhere around 2016 or 17. Then the solar PV capacity started catching up. This is the latest data, but as on August 2022, we have over 116 gigawatt of RE capacity installed in the nation, and a lot of the major share of the capacity is under the target of 175 gigawatt is under pipeline. It is likely to be installed by December or maybe by end of this financial year. But the critical part is the increasing share of RE in India's energy mix. So one part is installation of capacity, but the other is also about supply of RE as part of your total 24 hours energy requirement. Now, the global fluctuations in terms of energy markets because of the Ukraine war and associated price variations has affected energy supply across all the countries in general. India has also been affected by the fluctuations in terms of varying supply of coal and gas in the country, petroleum, basically crude oil in the country. And that had a huge risk, that posed a huge risk of mass blackouts in the nation owing to large demand supply gap. And I am happy to say that the renewable sector is the one which actually staved off that situation. The sector, because of this substantial installed capacity, has resulted in taking a major share of powering India through the tumultuous times of May to July, wherein there were reports of substantial shortages in coal supply across the thermal stations. So the focus of the government is to increase its dependency on RE, because RE is something which is indigenous, even though the solar PV modules are currently imported from China, but a lot of the entire supply chain is manufactured in India. So you're not dependent on any other country for meeting your energy security. And energy security is something which is integral to the to the nation's growth. The per capita energy consumption of any country is one of the key indicators of the country's growth when you talk about developed or developing countries. So, I mean, as an example, in US, the per capita energy consumption is more than 10 times what an average individual consumes in India. So it says it basically means that if we are to grow, it will require an enormous amount of energy in the future, and renewable is something which the government has targeted to, which will lead the nation's efforts in meeting that supply. So energy security, which is an integral aspect of today's energy independent growth by any nation, is totally dependent on, I mean, not exactly totally, but it is largely dependent on renewable as per the current trends. Now, when we talk about renewables, I mean, in general, we are already aware of a lot of technologies which are there in the market. Solar PV and wind are the ones which are commercially viable. There is geothermal, there is tidal wave energy, and some other technologies which are currently in the, some of them are, they have been tested and they have been found to be commercially viable. But there is one important thing to be understood, that finally, all of these are, I mean, most of these technologies are required to generate electricity. And electricity in India is basically purchased through the DISCOMs. I'll also talk about the Indian electricity market and the regulatory aspects. But what I'm trying to highlight here is that finally you have to supply electricity as a resource at a competitive tariff without basically diluting the power quality. So as a consumer, I want 220 volt and 50 hertz frequency at my socket. If as a technology provider, you're able to supply that without increasing my current tariffs, what I am paying for that electricity, then as a consumer, I will be more interested in choosing one technology over another. So in that sense, solar PV and wind are the ones which have broken that barrier, and they have actually resulted in lowering the tariffs. So right now, renewable energy is selling at tariffs which are lower than the coal-based thermal electricity which is produced in the country. Hybrid is something which is basically a combination of renewable, so solar and PV resources. And I'll talk about hybrid in the last part of our session. So just a brief idea, I mean, the block diagram, it talks about the energy conversion concept. Most of you are already aware of this. Solar PV, the panel, it basically generates electricity in DC mode, direct current mode, and it needs an inverter which converts it from DC to AC. Then there are some power electronics involved, which manage the power quality, which is supplied in the grid. There are specific grid norms which are to be followed, and that is why the projects have to install suitable power electronics in their inverters and the projects in general. Then that electricity is basically supplied through the national grid to the state grid, and then that reaches your home. From the wind projects, basically they have a generator, so the electricity is generated directly from the turbines. It's identical to the steam turbines, which are, and the concept is similar to the steam turbine technology used in coal plants, and it directly generates AC electricity. The solar energy potential, when as I was talking about, India is blessed with 300 sunny days in general, and the number of 3 to 6 kilowatt per meter square is a healthy number to result in technically and commercially viable electricity potential in the country. The deepest shade of red you find in Jammu Kashmir, Rajasthan, even Maharashtra for that matter. They are the ones which have huge and abundant solar potential in the country. And not surprisingly, majority of the projects which are set up in India in solar are currently set up in the western part of the nation. Now, when we talk about the regulatory aspects, Indian electricity market sector is basically a heavily regulated sector. Electricity in India is a concurrent subject under the Constitution. Concurrent means that most of the rules and provisions are made by the state governments, and some of the rules and provisions are also made by the central government. They have their own domains and they have their own jurisdictions, and they are the two entities work in tandem to supply electricity across the entire country. The left part, the top left part, it talks about the generator aspect. SPD means solar power developer, what we use in our sector. It's basically a generator. The generator has, as a project developer, it has to deal with these entities, the lenders, the EPC. The EPC suppliers are the engineering, procurement, and construction, the ones who are basically the contractors involved by the generators. The promoter are the investors. They have to deal with the land agencies, and they have to deal with the machine module suppliers or the machine suppliers. So basically OEMs. Then the right side, it talks about the consumers. So we as an individual receive electricity through our distribution companies, which are called DISCOMs. And these DISCOMs are commercial entities, and they are required to procure power from these generators through an agreement which is called power purchase agreement. It's a legal agreement, and it is dealt by a separate regulatory body called Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. It is a quasi-judicial body. Again, as it's a concurrent subject, so states also have a judicial body. You might have heard about the body called RERA, which was incorporated recently about to regulate the real estate matters. This body, Electricity Regulatory Commission, is something which is similar in the electricity domain. So DISCOM has certain obligations which are called renewable purchase obligation. The government of India, in order to facilitate increasing penetration of renewable in the beginning, it basically devised a strategy to mandate DISCOMs to procure more and more renewables, even though it was at a higher tariff at that time. I'm talking about 2011 to 13. But because of that mandate, the DISCOM slowly warmed up to the idea of procuring renewables in more and more capacity. And as demand increased, the supply also increased, resulting in crashing of tariffs. Now, these two entities, they interact with each other through the common entities which are in the bottom part of the image, which are the central governments, the bidding agency like SECI, and the consultants which offer them necessary advisory services. The CTU/STU is the transmission utility. So basically, from the generator's end, the electricity has to reach to the consumer's end through the transmission network. CTU is Central Transmission Utility. You might have heard about the organization called Power Grid. So Power Grid Corporation of India is the custodian of India's national grid. And CTU it was once part of the Power Grid. Now it is a separate legal entity. STU is the state analogy of the same organization, which is State Transmission Utility. All these transmission networks work at different voltage levels, and the jurisdictions of these utilities are also limited by these voltage differences. They have their own transmission systems, and they have their own laws and rules to abide by. So this is a tariff trend which has been the key indicator of proliferation of renewable energy in India. This trend is talking about the solar PV tariffs. As you can see, in 2014, we were generating solar at more than 5 rupees. Around 2014, it was more than 6 rupees. But now, around June, this data is about June 20. Even in June this year, also we are hovering at under 2.5 rupees per unit. So, just to give a context, the average procurement price of a DISCOM in India is generally around 3.5 to 3.7 rupees per unit. So it means that the DISCOMs currently are procuring at an average of 3.5 rupees, which they recover from their consumers. The renewable energy is currently priced below that average procurement price, which means that the first priority of any DISCOM now is to procure renewable over coal and thermal. So coal and thermal electricity, even gas-based electricity is quite costly in general. Hydro is quite cheap, but hydro is not abundant in the entire country. But the thermal electricity, which is the largest share of electricity provided in the country, that has an average tariff of more than 4 rupees as of now. So in that sense, renewable energy is the preferred choice over conventional energy sources. This is the electricity market structure. So as I already given an overview, the energy sources are basically the renewable energy or coal-based or whatever they are connected to the generation plants, which supply electricity to the distribution utilities through transmission utilities. I'll not go into much of the legalities, but currently the government is required to procure electricity under the Electricity Act. It has two sections, Section 62 and Section 63. Section 62 talks about setting up projects where the tariffs are determined on the project cost basis, which is the model used by NTPC and NHPC for their hydel and coal projects. Section 63, which is used by the renewable sector, it talks about bidding. So the tariffs which I had shown in the last slide, these are the results of a competitive bidding mechanism, which was brought in by the government in 2014. So Section 63 is basically public procurement through competitive bidding. Now, this is the concept which is furthered by our organization, which is Solar Energy Corporation of India. So what we do is basically we aggregate demand as well as supply on a central level. The DISCOMs across the country, they may not be able to procure power at a lower tariff based on their own financial health. But we, being a central agency, we are backed by the sovereign fund of the government. And therefore, what we do is we issue bids for procuring renewable power from projects anywhere in the country at their own quoted tariffs, and it's a reverse auction method where they are allowed to reduce their tariffs, and we then sell that power to the DISCOMs. So what we do is in that through this is that we arrive at a delinking of the generator and the consumer. so that the risks in the business are quite mitigated. That has resulted, this experiment has resulted in a drastic reduction of tariffs across solar, wind, both technologies. And bidding in India is governed by a set of rules which are called guidelines issued by the government. Under the Electricity Act, again, it's a mandatory requirement to procure electricity through bidding under a government issued guidelines. Government of Maharashtra also follows the same guidelines. The discoms of Maharashtra, the discom's name is MSEDCL, Maharashtra State Electricity Distribution Company Limited. It issues its own tenders. It issued its own competitive bids. And as recent as I think it was early September, they have discovered a solar PV tariff of somewhere around 2.8 rupees per unit. So that is the latest tariff which is discovered in Maharashtra. So bidding guidelines, they have key provisions which are related to project development. I mean, when some of you will obviously enter into the renewable sector, you'll be trained in these sectors, which are project commissioning of payment security, force majeure, change in law. A lot of these are basically legal aspects of the project implementation, which are standard to any power purchase agreement. Talking about wind sector was earlier, before the bidding mechanism was introduced in 2017. It was more of a sort of a first come first serve mechanism, which was governed by the state government. Central government did not have much jurisdiction on much involvement in setting up of wind projects. We as SECI, we introduced the bidding mechanism as a first in the country. Currently, SECI is the largest wind supplier in the country, wind aggregator in the country. And we started with a tariff of 3.46 rupees. Now, the latest tariff was discovered at somewhere around 2.8 rupees per unit. So wind sector in India is, again, it is largely located in, the wind potential is largely located in the western half of the country. There are 8 states identified by the government, which are windy states. The wind potential in India is seasonal. So the monsoon seasons are the ones which have highest wind resource availability. And somewhere around October to December, January, it is at the lowest. So depending only on wind is not a intelligent solution to meet your entire annual requirement. So that is where hybrid power comes in the picture, wherein we use the complementarity of solar and wind availability as a resource in the country, and we combine the two strengths, and we arrive at a fairly uniform energy supply profile for the entire year. Hybrid was again a concept which was introduced by our organization. This is a tariff trend which is reflected over the years. From a business perspective, just for some budding entrepreneurs, renewable, I'll just give an idea about what rooftop solar PV in India is about. So the companies which are looking, the small scale sectors basically, which are looking to enter in the sector, they enter through the rooftop solar PV sector. Rooftop solar PV is basically setting up a rooftop, basically solar PV projects on the rooftops. There are different studies across, conducted by private institutions, which have demonstrated a huge potential of rooftop solar PV availability in the country. There are 2 models in rooftop projects. One is CapEx model and one is OpEx model. CapEx is basically capital expenditure, wherein you set up a project, and from the customer's point of view, you buy that plant and you set up your that plant on your rooftop, and then whatever energy is supplied from that plant is your energy saving, and it is reflected in reduction in the electricity bill from your discom. From the OpEx perspective, it is basically that you do not invest anything in setting up the plant. The plant is installed by some other entity. It is called operational expenditure. So you lease your rooftop for the term of the agreement to an entity which is responsible for setting up the rooftop project, that entity invests in its own capital in setting the project, and it supplies electricity to the consumer at a tariff which is agreed between the two parties. So Maharashtra is currently one of the leading states in the country in terms of penetration of rooftop solar PV in the sector. This database is a bit old, and but still what we have collected from our sources, because our organization is basically dealing majorly in the ground mounted and utility scale projects. Rooftop projects are one aspect of our operation, but it is largely done through the state governments. So these are the two models, CAPEX and the RESCO model. RESCO model is easier for the consumer. CAPEX model is easier for the consumer because here you don't have to enter into a long-term agreement. Your rooftop is your own. The biggest hurdle in installation of rooftop projects in India is the locking of the rooftop, the empty space for a considerable period of, let's say, 20 to 25 years. That leads to a lot of litigation, because at some point the rooftop owner wants to install some or the other infrastructure on the empty space, and that will require taking away the solar PV project. So in case of a CAPEX model, since that asset is yours, so you can do whatever you want. As a CAPEX for the C&I customers, the commercial and industrial customers, warehouses, cold storage chains, and other heavy electricity guzzlers, this is a key model wherein it also helps in something which is called asset depreciation. It is a taxation term which is used by industries to reduce their tax outflow. It is a legal mechanism provided by the Ministry of Finance. So you are allowed to take depreciation on any of your assets, and renewable assets are included in the depreciation part. So that is again a huge imperative to go for renewables, apart from greening your process, entire production process. RESCO model is basically used across other institutions which don't have, or individual consumers which don't have enough capital to invest in a single at a single stage. So if they are okay with paying for that power, for example, your university or your college, it is buying power from the DISCOM at a commercial tariff. I am not aware of the rate, obviously, but I'm just assuming that they might be buying at a tariff of around, let's say, 5 rupees or something. The buildings have ample rooftop spaces, and if proper shading analysis is done, shading analysis means basically impact of other structures around the empty space, and how will the entire the shade of this those structures will play out over the entire day. That analysis, after that analysis, some suitable quantum of capacity which can be installed on your rooftops can be decided. After that rooftop system is set up, the college will basically pay for the electricity generated from that plant, and by that the energy consumption from the grid, from the DISCOM, is reduced. So in the end, you're basically paying something which is lower than what you're paying right now for the same amount of energy consumption. So that is what is called net metering or gross metering. I will not go into details. If there are some queries, we'll obviously take in the end. So just for the sake of brevity, I'm not going into what net metering and gross metering as of now. So RESCO model, the model is explained here in terms of the entities involved. There are investors which are basically investing in setting up the project. There are rooftop owners. Then the government is always there for necessary approvals and clearances. One important thing I would like to highlight is that electricity basically is a regulated subject in India. And as long as you are not connected to the central or state grid, you are not required to take any approvals as such. But if any element of your plant is connected to the electricity grid, which is owned by the center or state, you are required to take certain NOCs. And that is where the challenges lie, because from a DISCOM's point of view, it is very easy to understand that they are under different kinds of pressure to supply electricity at different rates to different type of customers. Professional institutions like yours, industries, these are the ones which are basically the steady paymasters to that discom. If these industries start to generate their own plant, there will be some point, if they start to generate their own electricity, there will be some stage when they will say that we don't need electricity supply from you, the discom. In that case, the discom loses its paying customer. So this is a give and take, which is a major issue in setting up of rooftop projects in the country. The discoms, they don't want to lose out on their customer, but they can also they cannot say no to any renewable project on paper at least. So that approval and clearances process is something which the government at center as well as state, they're trying to streamline as much as possible. A lot of progress has been made over the past decade, and the challenges which are basically there in the sector, the rooftop sector, we're trying to ease out those challenges as much as possible. Honorable PM has recently launched a portal for setting up of rooftop projects in the country, and that provides a one-stop solution. I'll discuss about that. So these are basically this is an overview of the challenges. High interest rates from an investor point of view, that is again a key challenge. Any bank, any lender will invest in your plant, any project, whatever you sell, only depending on the offer from that project. If that project is deemed to be risky, that bank gives you the money, lends you the money at a higher rate of interest. That higher rate of interest is basically built in your capital cost, in your project cost, and finally you're forced to sell that product at a higher tariff. So that is the key challenge. That is one of the key challenges in the renewable sector, especially the rooftop sector, because of which the developers are forced to sell the project at a higher tariff. And because of higher tariffs, there may be some consumers who may not be interested in such plants. As I said, electricity is electricity. It doesn't have any difference whether it is generated from coal or nuclear or renewable. So the key aspect is tariff. What you sell it to the landed tariff which you sell it to the consumer. So project viability is quite an exciting aspect in renewables. It requires a lot of innovative thinking, strategic thinking, tie up with financial institutions, suppliers at varying rates. And as some of you will enter into this sector, you'll find new and emerging challenges which are there in terms of technology and money management. So there's a sort of a rating of ease of doing business in the renewable sector. Technical standards are most simplest in the country. They are technically the projects are quite simple. The standardized in the country. There are IEC standards now, and the government has also introduced BIS standards. So when you talk about other appliances like air conditioners or refrigerators, Bureau of Energy Efficiency (BEE) has introduced star ratings. MNRE, the Nodal Ministry for Renewable Energy, has also introduced similar ratings, which are, the BIS has been formulated by MNRE, issued by some other ministry. But implementation and approvals with the red bars are the ones which, and as well as social awareness. These are two aspects which are very critical to success of this sector. So bankability, as I was telling, bankability is something which affects the project financials. Bankability means the attractiveness of that project for the banks. So these are the factors which affect bankability. If your project is, let's say, if you forget about renewable, even if you want to set up any plant, any production facility, same rules apply. Where are you trying to set up the project? Which location? Whether it is a risky, whether it is a encumbrance-free land? How will you build the project? The design aspect, the material. All these common features affect every infrastructure projects across the country. And the same is true for renewables. And renewables, especially for rooftops, the site aspect is very critical because the rooftop nature and the shadow part, they are the make or break aspects for any plant design. There we at the government have seen a lot of projects fail because proper study was not conducted prior to setting up the project with respect to the shadow analysis. So that affected the returns from the project and made the project unviable. Then the financial aspects, at what tariff will you pay the electricity, will you sell the electricity? That determines that is one of the key determinants. The payment security, even if you are striking a tariff of, let's say, whatever tariff, 3 rupees, 4 rupees, will you be able to get that payment for the entire term of the agreement? That is a key aspect. So from the government's point of view, we provide that assurity, and that is why the projects which are set up under the government agreements, because they provide a sufficient payment security, those projects are more viable or bankable. So they get loans at lower tariffs, lower interest rates, resulting in lower tariffs. Then the last part comes to the regulatory factor. So as I was telling you, discoms, if they are ready to give you NOC for setting up your own project or buying power from some entity other than discoms, then they are allowed to levy some charges, because since they're losing a customer, so they are levying some charges to basically compensate for that outflow of income. Those charges are called cross subsidy charges. There is another charge called additional surcharge. These charges vary from state to state, and Ministry of Power in 2022 May or somewhere around that time, they have issued new regulations called Green Open Access Charge rules, which which aims at standardizing these charges across the country, so that anyone can at least get an idea of what they'll be paying for when they go for renewable consumption on their own. These are key aspects. When you might have heard about the recent news about Amazon tying up with some renewable energy companies for greening its own facilities, its warehouses, its offices. So Amazon has tied up for more than 200 megawatt of renewable capacity. Now, how does he do that? Is basically by following these regulatory norms. So Amazon is the offices which are located across the country. They are currently buying from the discoms. But if they decide, since they've already decided to buy from some other entity, because the discom is not providing them renewable, so they are paying some additional charges, which are called cross subsidy charges and open access charges. Then the legal agreements also talk about change in law. So even after setting up a plant, there are some changes in regulations, laws. For example, GST change happened. Then the government also issued basic custom duty on import of solar PV modules to encourage domestic manufacturing. So all these aspects are called change in law, which are compensated under the agreements. So Ministry of New and Renewable Energy has announced a bouquet of initiatives to promote rooftop sector in India. Now, I'll just give you one. So I could not include it in the slide. So this is the latest initiative by the government. This is a national roof portal for rooftop solar. This can be used by any entity, even your college. So what it's basically, you can just imagine it as a Flipkart for renewable. So what do you do in Flipkart? You want to buy a mobile, you go to the website, you choose you have a list of options, you enter mobile phones, and you have thousands and thousands of options. You select your filters and all. Then you, irrespective of wherever the seller is located, you just click on the model you are interested in and you pay on the portal, and the item is delivered within a set of days, depending on your location. The same concept is borrowed in this portal. The National Rooftop Portal for Rooftop Solar is basically a one-stop solution for setting up a rooftop project by the customer. So here you have to, it's a 3 to 4 step process. You can just simply search on Google and you'll find the website in the first result itself. You have to register yourself. You also are eligible for subsidy. So for right now, individual customers, apart from commercial organizations and industries, they're entitled for 30% subsidy on the rooftop solar PV project cost. So you simply have to fill in your details, your location and requirements. And based on that, the DISCOM, which is nearest to you, they have impaneled a list of suppliers, integrators we call them. They are the ones which will approach you, and they will make they will conduct a study, and they will then offer you the cost, the system cost. If you are willing to accept that cost, then the process gets moves further. Then there are some approvals which are to be taken, but that is under the scope of the integrator. The DISCOM provides necessary net metering approvals, and finally the project is commissioned. And without you as a customer going to anyone, the subsidy is directly deposited in your account. So it's a quite kind of a faceless mechanism which has been rolled out by the government. And I would encourage everyone of you to try this out. I mean, just for information or knowledge purpose, you can always decide whether to go green or not based on your requirement. So government, as I mean, 30% subsidy I've already given, informed about. 70% is there in the special category states. Then there are some tax benefits from the integrator or the supplier point of view. Accelerated depreciation is what we had talked about in the earlier part. So that is something which is allowed by the government. Then the DISCOMs are also allowed to procure renewable energy certificates. There are some limiting factors by which, because of which certain entities may not be able to fulfill their renewable obligations. So to help in that scenario, the government also has the provision of renewable energy certificates. The assured power purchase agreement, as I was talking about bankability, the state utilities like MSEDCL in Maharashtra's case, they offer their own agreement so that it assures payment security to the developers. Net metering entities, again, it basically the meter allows two-way flow of electricity, and it calculates whatever you have consumed and it deducts whatever you have sold to the grid. And the two tariffs are then the two energy amounts are then the net of that amount is calculated, is multiplied with your electricity tariff, and that is called net metering. So that is one of the key aspects. SECI, as I had intimated, we are in the renewables domain. We are basically the implementing agency of the Government of India. Project sanction, subsidy disbursement, what the flowchart integrated here is basically pertaining to the rooftop sector, but we also conduct bidding and auctions without any subsidy element for ground mounted projects. The intermittency of renewable is the one which is the key limiting factor of renewable becoming the sole energy provider in the country. Even though there is humongous potential, there is enough land availability, grid is there and everything is there, still we cannot depend on renewable in general because of the intermittency of the resource. Sun is not always there, wind is not always there. So you are bound to use coal-based or some other supply to give you firm 24-hour supply. Now, there are advancements in the terms of storage of electricity, which have reduced this level of this intermittence to a large level. Hybridization of solar and wind is basically a key advancement in the sector, and this is the way ahead from the government's point of view. It facilitates better land utilizations. For example, you might have seen a lot of wind turbines set up in the state of Maharashtra in the backyard, the wastelands. There is by government regulations, because of the turbine size, there is a minimum quantum of area which is to be left between the two turbines, empty between the two turbines. You can't do anything between these two turbines. So that empty area goes wasted if you set up, unless you set up a solar panel there. Solar panel is allowed to be set up in those that empty space. So that allows for space optimization. Land is a precious commodity, of course. So that is some huge advantage offered by solar and wind hybridization. Then you also optimize evacuation infrastructure. See, the transmission system is set up for entire project. It doesn't go away if you don't use that line. So transmission line, it goes waste if you don't supply electricity through that line. So as a consumer, as a supplier, as an energy supplier, for example, let's say you set up only a solar PV project. The sun provides electricity for 8 hours of the day. So for the remaining 16 hours, you're not using the grid, but you're paying for that grid for the entire 24 hours. So it doesn't make a financially viable sense. Right now, the charges are quite low, so it doesn't affect too much. But since from an engineering point of view, as an engineer, we are trained to devise optimal solutions so that resource has to be optimized. So this evacuation infrastructure can be if optimized by injecting solar and wind power from the same injection point at different points of time. So in the solar and wind resource, a large part of the country, they are complementary in nature. By that I mean that solar generates in the daytime and wind is generally generated in the evening or the night period. So overall, throughout a 24-hour period, you get enough supply, fairly constant supply for around 16 hours of the day. So that suits requirement of majority of the customers, apart from industrial or process industries which require flat power supply. Then it helps in peak demand matching. In India, peak demand, electricity demand is generally around in the morning peak and the evening peak. Morning around 8 to 10 and evening around 8 to 10 or 12. So there the solar addresses the morning peak and the wind addresses the evening peak requirements. So these are some of the achievements which we can think about when we talk about hybridization. So this is the power profile complementarity what I was talking about. So the blue line, it talks about wind generation profile, and the orange line talks about the solar generation profile. So as you can see, the two are complementary to each other. The gray line, which adds the two generation numbers, it gives you a better power profile. It is more constant or smooth instead of depending only on solar and wind. That is a key result. That's a key reason of the DISCOMs largely favoring towards hybrid instead of plain solar or wind technology. Hybrid technology has now also reached below 3 rupees, so it is competitive in terms of tariff also. So there's no point not going for hybrid if you can go for that. The last is land availability. As I was talking about, land is a precious commodity, but the solar PV concept also gives you an advantage of using water bodies. So these are two, so the left part is in France, but the right one is the one which is currently the largest floating solar PV project in India. It is set up by NTPC. It gives you an advantage on two fronts. One is using the available water body across the country, which is currently lying waste. It reduces in evaporation of water from these bodies, and also technically it is more sound because the cooling effect around the panel, it increases efficiency of these panels. Solar PV modules work on a very low efficiency, somewhere between 21 to 24%. So you can imagine even 2 to 3% of increase in efficiency will be, it results in a huge benefit to the customer in terms of energy generation. So on account of these factors, the government has identified a range of reservoirs, dams across the country to set up floating solar PV projects in the country. SECI is working currently in 3 to 4 states, not in Maharashtra, in my knowledge. but in the upper Himalayan region, the Uttarakhand, Himachal Pradesh region, and the eastern region. So more and more floating solar PVs are expected to be set up in the country. So this brings an end to my presentation. If there is anything else, we can obviously we can discuss. If there are any queries, please feel free to ask. Yeah.
Questions, guys?
Hello, sir. Sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Thank you so much for the wonderful session.
Thank you.
Dr. Mehul was there in the session. He joined from Germany. His background from IIC Bangalore and IIT Mumbai. And he was very interested about listening to the lecture. So he asked me to send a link. I sent him, he joined. Dr. Mehul Raval, just he left. It was very.
Sorry, I'm not able to hear you clearly.
Sir, can you hear me now?
Yeah, please tell.
Dr. Mehul Raval from Germany. He worked for a German company for installing the entire solar plant for solar cell manufacturing. He worked for many countries, Turkey, Denmark and India also. He was with us in our session when we were giving the lecture.
Okay.
So he was requested when I was told that there is sessions going on. Then he joined to listen to lecture. It was very interesting, very informative, sir. Thank you so much for your valuable time. Because we know SECI is only one dedicated central government public sector for solar energy, doing a lot of great work for the country. So we are very happy and privileged to have you here from SECI. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So I can leave now.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me there. Thank you.